Because it was a very big thing in the 80s where like, oh, you have a clada and it's that way, so you're not single.
No, that's a very American thing.
Oh, okay.
This was just...
We ruin everything.
No, I don't. I have an American passport.
I heard that as well. If you have it turned upside down, it means that you're taken. Or
yeah, like if it's upside down, like the heart's empty.
Yeah.
And then...
No, see, this means my heart is given to my parents.
That's because you put it on your finger, so...
Well, the heart is facing the bloodline. This is the
Correct.
friendship hand. And so this is the love hand.
Okay. So, see, it really does depend on the hand and...
Absolutely,
okay.
it does, yeah. But no, I wanted to take my parents to the grave. That's why I tattooed it on my finger. Very dramatic, I know.
Very, very Irish.
Very Irish.
The
I'm
guilt.
very intense. I'm
Yeah.
a Scorpio.
Of course you are.
And you're a Virgo, so
I
you
get
need control.
Yes.
Do you have enough control right now?
I am always in control, whether you like it or not, Scorpio.
Oh, you do. Yeah, because your bestie is a Scorpio.
Yes, he is. Yes.
So it's amazing, Michelle Visage, that we are here today.
Limerick.
In Limerick. And this is Richard Lynch and this is Michelle Visage. And it's the day that your friend got a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame and given to no other than Jane Fonda.
Can you imagine?
I'm
Barbarella
shitting myself.
gave the Glamazon the star.
I'm
Yeah.
so happy for him.
Overwhelmed.
He's such a beautiful person. He's such a wonderful human being.
People see the TV side of Rue and they listen to our podcast. What's the tea? It's free, by the way.
Yeah.
And they hear and they see a bit of Rue, but to really know Rue is to know the depth
I know.
of RuPaul, and it is quite a gift for me.
Yeah, well, he's a very close friend of yours and he's been very kind to me and I really treasured the moments that I've spent with him. We had a couple of very funny moments.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm not going to lie.
No, but I'm sure.
Yes, we did. And he's a wonderful person. But you're here in Ireland now and you're part Irish, aren't you?
I am part Irish. Yeah, I was just telling our driver friend Martin that my granny is her family's from Ireland, her mother's side. And I was telling him, he said, what's her last name? And her last name is Fick. I think it's F-I-C-K-E. It's a tragic last name. Wow. Or F-I-C-K. And he said, if it were him, I would look up north. He said, because a lot of times names signify where they're from. So that's what he was telling me. But my granny, in traditional Irish spirit, was one of 13. Yeah. And the parents couldn't afford them, so they all went off to foster care.
Right.
And so she doesn't really know the story. So I'm going to have to do one of those TV shows to find out really.
And you know anyway, the saying goes, do you have any Irish in you? And
you say, want some?
You want some? Yeah.
You can insert any ethnicity.
Yeah. And so why do you think, like Drag Race, I know you weren't in for the first 2 seasons, which it was not the same without you.
Thank you.
But why do you think that straight people have such an affinity with an LGBTIQ, whatever
every letter
teen show?
This is simply my observation, not speaking for RuPaul or the TV show, but for me, being a cisgender, heteronormative presenting woman, I think it's the idea of having a place that's safe, that you can say me too, and understand what it's like not to fit in, what it's like not to be normal, what it's like to have struggled or continue to struggle. And I think that's part of it. So for me, if I had RuPaul's Drag Race growing up, maybe I wouldn't have been so hard on myself, self-harmed, had an eating disorder, all of the above, because I knew that there were people out there that were freaks, that were weirdos, that were different, that struggled, that weren't fitting into the normal social status. And I think that is what the connect is, especially with the younger kids, because we went from a very queer-centric show, which we still are at the core and will always be, to appealing to 9, 10, 11, 12, 13-year-old cisgender girls.
And you're a cisgender woman,
but
you're a massive ally of the LGBTIQA community. Do you feel part of that community, being a cisgender straight woman?
I have never, ever not felt part of the community. Yeah. It was only this year when somebody challenged me because I used the word we when talking about Kevin Spacey and his apology, and I retweeted it and said, this is lame and we do not accept your apology under this guise of you saying, oh, I forgot that night, but I'm gay. Yeah. No. So a lesbian then tweeted me and said, you do not get to use the word we because you are not part of the community. And I said, well, the last time I checked, it was the LGBTQIA+, and A means ally. And then I got an onslaught of hate from young kids saying, no, bitch, it means asexual. Now, let me just state this.
Wow.
I know that A means asexual. I would never take that away from the asexuals. Have it. It also means advocate within the community, gay people, queer people advocating for queer people or outside. But it also means ally. And I have been a part of this community before there was an L, a G, a B, or a T.
Yeah.
I don't want the letters.
But you slept with women anyway.
I slept with everything.
You slept with everything.
Correct.
Yeah.
I don't want the letters. I don't need the letters. The letters are yours. I'm not trying to take them away.
Yeah.
So what it showed me is that we do have a really big problem of dividing rather than unifying.
But why do we need the letters? Why do we need the labels? Why do we need the identity?
We don't need them. But I think as a community, it serves a purpose because we've always been marginalized and separated. And I have too, because I have been the girl who has always dated out of my race, who has always hung out with the queer kids. And I've been the brunt of hate crimes. I'm not going to cry about that because it's not directed at me, but I've stood by the side when it has happened and have supported and been there through the AIDS crisis and all of this.
Yeah, but you came up in the ballroom scene.
Correct.
I read you were the first woman that was actually...
Biological woman.
Yeah. In the voguing...
Correct. Category.
In the voguing category. Category is...
Vogue!
Where would we be without...
Allies?
Without the LGBT culture? Where would the world be?
Oh, okay. So the world would be in a much different place, much like we're facing now in Trump America.
Yeah.
That's where we would be. We would be regressing. I think what happened that night...
At Stonewall?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think was a big change for the world. I think that them fighting back and doing what they needed to do to not be repressed and oppressed anymore was the beginning of a new era.
Right.
And people can't forget the people like Sylvia Rivera and Marsha P. Johnson and all the people that fought back that night at the Stonewall Inn in New York City, which, by the way, is why we have a gay pride.
Absolutely.
And a lot of kids don't know that. So what they're not...
Marsha P. Johnson formed STAR. She was the first one to fight
Sylvia.
for the rights of transgender people.
Correct.
And drag
Which
queens.
back then were not called transgender. They were called transvestites.
Right.
And most of the time never even called trans anything. They were just identified as gay, queer, or whatever.
Right.
I grew up on the Christopher Street Piers, and that's where I got my queer education and my gay education, where I became part of the community. But there was never any need for labels or identification. The trans women that I know were just women.
Yeah.
And if they weren't women, they identified as gay men, but they had breasts and they lived as women. There was never any issues that are there now within the community. Always outside the community. There always was hate, and there probably always will be, sadly.
Yeah, but also there's a lot of homophobia amongst the LGBT community, just the same way as women are sometimes hard on one another.
Correct.
Why do you think that exists?
Self-loathing.
Self-loathing.
Yeah. There's a lot of self-loathing gay people or queer people that are not happy with who they are, mostly because they were told they were less than growing up, or their parents didn't accept them for who they are, and they hated that they were the way that they were. We see it all the time. Angels in America is a perfect example of that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so
sad.
We see it all the time, and depictions of it, if not real life.
Yeah.
So I think that that's where it stems from.
But do you think that homophobia is its roots in misogyny?
Well, it can.
Because it's okay to be a woman with another woman. Men will accept that, but they won't accept two men together. It's not okay to want to be feminine or to want to wear a dress or put on makeup. But gay women are a lot more accepted by the general society, especially the patriarchal society.
True, but there's also the whole, drag thing that you just touched on being misogynistic, and I disagree with that. So, I think it depends. It's a case by case basis. Right. But yes, I think homophobia started with or has roots in misogyny. Sure.
And you consider yourself a feminist?
Yeah, 100%.
So what is feminism?
To me, I think it has a different meaning to everybody.
Right.
For me, I was always brought up with the identity and the thought process that feminism means that I don't need a man to get what I want. So for me, I never needed a man to pay my bills. I never needed a man to get a job. I've always worked in a white man's world because that's the world we live in, but I never needed anybody to get what I wanted. Yeah. And to me, that's the innate foundation of feminism.
And do you think that a lot of people consider feminism to be getting mainstreamed right now with the Me Too movement and, basically what about black women? What about LGBT people? Do you think they're forgotten in terms of the Me Too movement and the whole?
Well, I don't think they're ever, in my world, they're never forgotten. In my world, they come first. I've had a lot of people criticize me and say, why are you fighting for gay rights when you're not a gay woman, when you should be fighting for equality for women and equal pay? And it's like, why do I have to choose who I fight for? I do fight for equal rights for women. Of course, I'm raising 2 daughters in this world. So of course I fight for the rights of women and equality and the Me Too movement. And the Me Too movement is important in other aspects, but I do not think we need to lose Black Lives Matter. I do not think we need to lose...
Everyone has a place.
Correct. And everybody has a fight that they're fighting.
Everyone has a place. But, you know, everything is so PC right now. You know, like before, when I was in New York in 1993, we were allowed to throw around slang words to other gay people, and now there's kind of an ownership of words. You're afraid. You say anything, you're racist, you're homophobic, you're transphobic. You can't fart now. And something is wrong and someone has a problem with you. And like, I think that, I mean, I look at Twitter and I look at everything else and I feel like, you know, you're not allowed, there's no freedom of speech anymore.
Agreed. And that's the younger generation.
Right.
I think they're misguided and misled sometimes with that. For me, when I grew up in the community, now mind you, I'm going to be 50 this year. It's a long time ago.
You look flawless.
I mean, tell me more.
That's amazing.
It's a long time ago. But the T word was an affection. It was a term of affection.
Yes.
It was an endearment.
Of course.
I was called and am still called that.
Yeah, of
and
course.
sadly to say by
Yeah.
my trans friends.
Yeah.
But it never was bad, whereas we know the N word has always been a bad word. The T word wasn't.
Yeah.
And the F word is constantly thrown around between gay men.
Yes.
I would never say it, but,
Yeah.
you know, so there are always just, you know, I don't know what the right word would be, an exception to every rule within the community. So yes, in my opinion, I think we are far too PC, especially in the drag world, because drag is the very antithesis of political correctness.
Absolutely.
So for drag queens to be politically correct, it's almost working against what drag started out as, which is weird.
You know, it's kind of, people aren't allowed to be themselves. Now people are saying, you know, the whole big argument and debate that was going on about drag queens and trans people and like trans people were given freedom through drag, because back in that time with Marsha P. Johnson and stuff, she was allowed express herself through drag in her development of who she was as a person. And as a
Interestingly enough, Marsha P. Johnson would present differently on different days. I think she's the very
she's amazing.
binary, like a very perfect example of a non-binary, non-gender conforming, non-binary person, because there were some days she would show up as a boy, some days she'd be a drag queen, some days she'd just, you know, be a woman. Whatever she felt moved her, and non-binary wasn't a term. Neither was gender fluidity or gender non-conforming. So none of these labels that we talk about with such disdain ever really existed back then. You just were. And we were all fighting the same thing.
Sexuality and gender identity are spiritual issues. Do you think sexuality is spiritual? That's my big question of the day for you.
Is it spiritual?
I know that you're raised Jewish, but I'm not even talking about in terms of religion.
We were raised barely Jewish.
Barely
but yes.
Jewish. But I'm talking about in terms of, you know, like your higher power and your self-love, gender and sexuality.
I think so. I think it's on a spiritual level, because we all identify differently spiritually, and I'm not talking religiously, I'm talking spiritually. So gender could be spiritual to a lot of people. But, you know, governments are finally coming around in other countries saying that they're realizing that trans people, you know, being trans was once diagnosed and still is in many countries as a mental illness. And people are realizing now that you're born trans. It's not a mental illness. They're the third
sex, essentially.
Yeah, well, intersex has always been, and which is different, and there's always been part of the rainbow.
Well, intersex they used to call hermaphrodite, which is not PC anymore.
No.
So there's I mean, I was interviewing kids last year at Limerick Pride, which you actually did a shout out video for.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Thank you, Michelle.
Yes, I remember.
And you know, the kids were saying, "My name is Roger, but I'm a she," and it was all so confusing to me.
Well,
now, this is someone that
intersex is confusing.
No, what, they weren't even intersex. This was non-binary.
Oh, got it.
No, there's so much terminology now that really, to educate yourself without insulting people about who they are, it can be quite a difficult process to educate
But
And not
even for
any
myself, who's part of it, and I try to explain the non-binary, and I have an issue calling a single person they because of the plurality of the word, and that's where I get tripped up. Like if I'm talking to you or talking to that referring to one person and saying they or them,
Right.
it's not a disrespect. It's me getting confused in my brain going,
Yeah.
they and them is plural, they and them is plural, ding, 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 and there's one person. So it's a matter of that. It's never disrespect. That's why I kind of like the Zim identity that they were trying to do at
Do you
some
think
point.
you were put on this earth for all this? But the reason why you're here tonight, obviously, you've taken time out. You've come all the way down from Dublin, and you're getting up on stage now to talk about all this to the public. Is this why you were put on this earth? Is this why you're here? Do you think?
I believe it's my calling. Yeah. You know, again,
What exactly is that calling?
to be an ally and fight for the rights of a community. That's always been there for me. And circling back, because I feel like we're winding up. So circling back to the beginning.
Yeah.
When I talked about the great divide within the community, when I first became part of the community, I was 17 years old. And the reason I became part of this community is because a queer boy named David, who's no longer with us, invited me in and looked at me and said, "Who are you? You're the most beautiful creature I've ever seen." He was a dark-skinned, brown Puerto Rican boy in New York City who never once judged me for what I look like, for who I am, for who I love, for who I slept with, for what I believed in. He then brought me to a family, and that's how I got involved in the ballroom scene. And they never once told me I was less than, not good enough, too straight, too white, and it was a Puerto Rican and
judgment.
Dominican. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
This community was never, ever founded on judging people. And I'm not talking about judging drag queens on a drag show. I'm talking about judging humans.
Human beings. There's too many labels. Like everyone wants to put everyone in a box.
I think we need to stop doing that and start realizing that we are all in the same gay boat. We really are.
In the same human boat.
100%.
Everyone shits the same color.
It's
Sorry
about,
for being rude.
well, it depends what you eat.
Yeah.
It's
But
about
you know what I mean.
humanity.
Yeah.
And that is going away in this PC movement.
Right.
And I think it's a very slippery slope that
Right.
we're walking in.
In this, because it's supposed to be liberalism. Because the liberalism, we can't use terminology we used to use 20 years ago. Everything is PC now. And ironically, it's through liberalism.
I encourage people to identify the way that they identify,
Yeah.
live their truths. But I also encourage people to stop being so judgmental if somebody sees something or somebody an opposite way that they do.
Right.
Just because you don't believe in that doesn't mean that they don't.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't take that away from them and then demonize them for it. So I feel like we've gone too
I think
far.
the creativity, that's what I was trying to say earlier, with Tchaikovsky made the Nutcracker Suite, Michelangelo made the Sistine Chapel, and Oscar Wilde made, Dorian Gray. Without all these amazing people and their creativity, that we wouldn't have any foundation of society to begin with.
Who, the most of them weren't allowed to even be queer in the time that they were, queer writers, directors, composers, and had to live their lives undercover. So the fact that we're able to live the way that we can live, I think we should celebrate all the letters that are in our beautiful rainbow and embrace them all instead of judging them all.
And before we go, I'm going to teach you an Irish word, and do you agree that she's this penciled? Cheekbones for days, kind of bitch. Penciled.
What?
If you say, that bitch is penciled, oh my God, she is penciled, that's a Limerick word for
Fierce?
fierce.
Really?
You said
Okay.
it. Oh, I told you not.
Penciled.
Can you take it to Drag Race,
that's an
please,
English
Michelle?
word.
Can we
That's
get
not
an man up
Irish.
in here no, well, penciled, it's a Limerick slang.
Teach me an Irish language.
Limerick slang, like, oh my God, I am weak. That means, oh my
But
God, that's so...
teach me something in the Irish language.
In the Irish language, I don't speak a lot of Irish, but I do know Bishan agus Marag Rahia Salaba, agus Canik Sean Mashawn and Ish agus Arish. That means John and Mary were riding in the bed, and John bought sweets now and again. That's about the extent of my Irish. Does anyone know
my
Irish in this room?
Tátu go hauling. That means you're beautiful.
Oh, thank
Oh,
you.
say that out loud.
Tátu go hauling.
Tátu go hauling.
Michelle, Tátu go hauling.
No, that doesn't count. No, Richard. No.
Tátu go hauling.
No,
Thanks
no.
for talking to you, Michelle Visage. You
Thank
made my
you.
day. It was
Thank you,
wonderful.
my
And it's
darling.
great to connect with you. I feel so honoured and privileged. You're a wonderful person. You're doing great work, and your calling is to help people.
Oh,
I know that
thank
you're
you,
wonderful.
sweetie.
This is Michelle Visage. This is Richard Lynch. You've been watching ilovelimerick.com. I've just had
I
an
love
orgasm.
Limerick.
I love Limerick. Say it right there, Michelle.
Which one?
I love
I love Limerick.
Thanks, Michelle Visage. That was
Thank you, my
wonderful.
darling.
Thank you. I enjoyed that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Aw, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
It gets deep